As we record this, we are officially 11 days from the college football season. When you're listening, this will be even closer. Welcome back to another episode of the Walk on Redshirts podcast. Make sure if you're not following us already on social media, YouTube, we're on all your streaming platforms. Make sure you subscribe. We got a couple guests with us this week. Got Lance Barton from Always Talking Ball podcast. And if you've been reading anything, Jake Thigpen, or as we're calling him today, Thiggy, on here as well. Our own SEC person, our SEC contributor. Appreciate both joining us today.
Hey, appreciate you having us, Jake. Appreciate you having us, Will. I'm excited to be here. Been checking your guys' stuff out on social media and checking out some of your podcasts. I'm a fan of your all's work. So I was excited that you guys wanted me to hop on here and talk a little SEC football because it just means more, fellas.
It just means more. Even when Georgia is speeding at 105 miles an hour every other week.
Yeah.
You know, they're just trying to get to the end goal. They're trying to go as fast as they can. They're trying to get there.
We like to go fast, Jake. We like to go
SEC
fast.
ball, though. SEC ball, we love talking it. Last conference preview for us as we head in here. Jumping into it, I think going through the whole offseason, the biggest shock to everybody was Nick Saban retiring. I know it was happening eventually. We all knew Nick Saban couldn't coach forever, but it actually happened. And to me, it was a shock. I thought he was going to at least have a couple more years left in him. Lance, would love to hear your thoughts on him leaving, and then B, the transition to going and hiring Kalen DeBoer.
Yeah, it definitely kind of came out of left field there in January, out of nowhere. Like you said, people kind of thought it was coming eventually, but just didn't think it was going to come to an end that abruptly like that. And as far as a transition is concerned, I think that how AD Greg Byrne and Tuscaloosa handled that situation as far as targeting his man and Kalen DeBoer, and within like 48 hours already having a guy with the stature of Kalen DeBoer who just took Washington, of all teams, to the national championship game. And that, I know when it first started, that 30-day rule where players could just enter the transfer portal, the way that the national media was covering it, it seemed like it was just doomsday in Tuscaloosa with all the players that were leaving. But overall, they didn't lose a ton of just starters like overall. I mean, really the biggest loss, without a doubt, is Caleb Downs. I mean, the dude's a superstar. He's going to do big things at Ohio State. I mean, you can make an argument he's the best safety in all of college football, like already just after his freshman year. And so that was a huge loss. But some of the other losses, they've already got plenty of talent. But I mean, that cupboard's not bare at Alabama.
No, and like you said, and Caden Proctor was another one that looked like he was going to be a big loss, but obviously he returns to Alabama.
Yep.
And Jake, you're commenting from a different point of view here because you are a resident Georgia fan, but you've been in the SEC, so you've been seeing Nick Saban. Is it interesting, or how does it feel? How does it feel being an SEC fan, knowing that Nick Saban's not in the conference anymore?
I mean, a part of me is I'm excited because I'm a Georgia fan, and at least when it comes to how Georgia right now under Kirby Smart is built, it seems like they would be that next team. Because Kirby Smart seems like the closest coach on paper to Nick Saban. I mean, he and Saban are so similar, not only personality-wise, but clearly, Smart was very, transparent and open when he first became Georgia's head coach that he was going to mirror what Alabama did, and he's had great success, right? So part of me is kind of happy because I'm like, all right, Georgia's 1-5 against Nick Saban in Alabama. So maybe there's that opportunity for Georgia to take a next step. But at the same time, the conference is harder now. I don't think I'm realistic enough as a fan to really appreciate where Georgia's at and understand that Georgia's not going to win 6-7 national titles like Saban did, because of how strong the conference is. And so that, bringing it back to Saban, that's something that, Saban will be the GOAT. Like, I understand Bear Bryant, the love for him, but what Saban was able to do, I just don't believe will ever be matched, especially in this new era. There's just so much turnover on teams, and NIL talent, the talent distribution is going to start changing a little bit. And So I just sit here basically and I'm like, man, what an error. Like, I got to witness the GOAT of coaching. College football is my favorite sport by far. So I guess it's just overall respect. I still, I have that respect for him, and I will miss not seeing Saban on the sideline because, you know, it meant something when I got to experience my first national championship as a Georgia fan in 21. It was special to beat Saban. It wasn't just Bama; it was Saban's Alabama.
Yep.
And William, you have a little bit of experience that as well, because it was almost like exercising demons there. Obviously Dabo and Saban had their battles multiple years in a row, same national championship. So there has to be an appreciation there as well for what Nick Saban did, knowing that Dabo was able to beat him twice.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they beat us when I was there my senior year. Got them back the next time. They got us back the next time. But the last laugh is with Clemson, fortunately. So in 2018, when we took them down over in San Francisco. But yeah, I'm going to just reiterate everything Figgy said. We got to witness the GOAT. We got to witness the greatest of all time coach day in and day out. I mean, there's not many coaches that are coaching as hard as Nick Saban was when they were up 50 against Charleston Southern in the fourth quarter and someone misses an assignment. And that's what separates him from all the other coaches. He never let off the gas. He was always recruiting the hardest. He was always coaching the hardest. And then he would level the guys. He also taught them life. And then another thing that speaks to his greatness is, how many coaches do you know in any sport and any level get the field named after him the year they retire? I mean, he's already getting Saban added to not just any stadium, but Bryant-Denny Stadium. He's getting added to that already, and he hasn't even been gone a year. So, I mean, kudos to Saban for a wonderful, wonderful career. The bad man is gone. We don't have to watch him anymore. We just got to find a new enemy, though. So Kirby Smart, he's a very high candidate for the new enemy. But we'll see. Ryan Day is up there. Mario Cristobal, if he can win some games, might not like him. We'll see. There's so many possibilities now, though.
If Mario Cristobal can learn how to close out a game, maybe he would actually make the list. But until he learns what the quarterback kneel down is, yep. I think we're all safe. But let's head into this year. Obviously, when you look at Nick Saban's career, they went through a lot of different transitions for the offense. At one point, Jake Coker won a national championship as a quarterback, but then players like Bryce Young, who were phenomenal, don't, because the transition in the game and how it differed. Kalen DeBoer seems like he brings a pretty high-profile offense. We saw what he did at Washington. Even at Fresno State, he had Jake Haener. He gets a different type of player here in Jalen Milroe. Michael Penix had a phenomenal deep ball. He had excellent wide receivers here. What do you see that Kalen DeBoer brings that's going to help take Jalen Milroe back to the college football playoff? And what does he have around him that's going to help have him have an explosive offense this year?
Yeah, so I just think with DeBoer's system overall, what I've loved is like the people constantly talk to him about like your system, and he is quick to tell people, look, our system always can adapt to the talent that we have and the players that we have on our roster. And he said, we've got a quarterback with a unique skill set that we're definitely going to utilize, utilizing him in the run game, et cetera. And last year, Milroe was like feast or famine. He was not very good in the intermediate pass game, but he was great at the shot plays down the field. And like you just mentioned, we saw what Michael Penix and that offense and that receiver group did at Washington, throwing the ball down the field. So you got to imagine they're still going to be able to use that explosive play type offense. And receiver-wise, there is the key word and phrase for this Alabama team: a ton of talent, but unproven.
Yep. They've
got a ton of talent at wide receiver, 4- and 5-star players all over the place. They've got 3 tailbacks that are like 2 or former, 5-star tailbacks, and the young guys, and Richard Young and Justice Haynes. And Jim Miller was a former 4-star, one of the top tailbacks in the state of Texas. He's probably going to be the starter, him or Justice Haynes. So they've got 3 really good tailbacks. The strength of this team, based off what we're hearing at fall camp, could be the offensive line. And we thought that was going to be the case last year, and they gave up a program record and embarrassing amount of sacks last year in the pass game. But I think a lot of that also had to do with scheme. I think that DeBoer's scheme alone this year is going to help this offensive line out a ton. And he has talked about a lot so far through fall camp that is the group since the day that he got here, the group that has improved the most so far has been this offensive line. So I think that based off what he's been saying in regards to using like the system can adapt, that with the offensive line being as good as it can be, with Milroe's ability in the run game as well, I think you're going to see them run the football a lot more than what Washington did last year. And then they're going to utilize that in the play action pass game and take some shots down the field with these speedy wide receivers that they've got.
Yeah, I really like what Justice Haynes has shown over even a little bit of time.
Yeah.
It just seems like there's an explosive ability about him that could be game breaker as potential. And Figgy, I want to toss it over to you. Similar question here. So on this team, offense or defense, where do you think the strength of this team overall is going to be this year?
I'll say offense. I mean, Alabama. I think Alabama's defense, was always a stable under Saban, and there's still going to be talent there, but the losses in the secondary would concern me. I say offense not only because of the returning talent. I don't have it in front of me, but I mean, don't they return like 7 or 8 starters? Okay, so they return 6, and then of course you return your starting quarterback that showed progression. He got better. I mean, I would know watching, him make some plays to beat Georgia and keep Georgia from defending their title. I'm just so curious, excited as I can be as a Georgia fan to see Milroe with DeBoer and in that system, because and I don't want to repeat really anything that Lance was saying because he hit the nail on the head, but it's like, that system, he has proven throughout his coaching career as an offensive coordinator to head coach at Fresno, Washington, that he can adapt, right? And he adapts with different quarterbacks. And so, Penix and Milroe, they have some similarities, but they're actually very different quarterbacks, right? Mm-hmm. Penix he's going to stand in the pocket. He'll run if he has to, maybe to get that first down on 3rd and short or whatever, 4th and short. But Milroe, like his running ability, he's like a running back. The way he's built, and at least that's how he looks to me when he runs. He is like a bruising running back, but he improved, through the air. So I just think the offense for Alabama will be the key. I think that the defense should still be good, but let's just say it takes them a while to mesh, especially in the secondary. Maybe those first few games, or it takes longer for the secondary to mesh. The offense will have to play well, and it'll have to be the key for Bama's success, in my opinion.
Yeah,
go ahead, Will. Sorry, Lance. One of Nick Saban's calling cards was the defensive backfield. So losing Nick Saban and losing talent back there, especially in a guy like Caleb Downs, I think we're going to see a lot of growing pains for them. And I think 6 games might be nice for them to see them mesh. Obviously, you have a really good coach that's there now. The defensive backs coach's name is slipping my brain, but I think we're going to see more of a growing pain than we might anticipate because of Saban being missing. And then to reiterate the offensive takes y'all have, Dylan Johnson for DeBoer ran the ball 233 times last year. Mm-hmm. So I think when we think of Kalen DeBoer, we think of, hey, throw the ball, air raid, spread the ball out. And you think of Michael Penix and throwing the deep balls to those 3 big-time receivers in Jalen Polk and McMillan and Odunze. But Dylan Johnson, I mean, he was averaging 5 yards a run, and they had a really, really good offensive line. So just to reiterate what y'all were saying, we go back. This just in, Caden Proctor transferred back in from Iowa again. I think he transferred out, transferred back in, transferred out, snip, snap, snip, snap. He's back. He was a star left tackle as a freshman, which you never see. He's back, and the rest of the offensive line's back. I think they replaced the center. So the running game is going to be phenomenal. I'm very excited to see how creative they get with that running game, but I am worried about the passing game. Lance, you brought it up. You have a bunch of talent, but guys, you could have the best guys in the world out wide, but if you can't throw the ball consistently, you're going to struggle. I mean, look what Alabama did against Michigan. Michigan knew that's what they were going to do last year in the playoff game, and Alabama struggled down the stretch. They knew that Jalen Milroe had to run the ball. Everybody knew what the play call was on that 4th down play play call at the end of the game. They knew Jalen Milroe was going to keep the ball, and it cost them. So I wouldn't be shocked if, Jalen Milroe struggles, because everything I'm reading about with Ty Simpson, he's been phenomenal. I don't know if Jalen Milroe loses the job. I wouldn't be completely shocked. I would be shocked. I say that, but I wouldn't be completely shocked because Ty Simpson, I'm pretty sure he was a 5-star too coming out of high school. Was he not?
Yeah, he was. He was like the number 2 quarterback in the country coming out of out of the Nashville Brentwood area.
Yeah. So, they just got talent galore. It's bull crap.
Yeah. And I think too, like what's all Alabama fans are thinking this, and people that aren't Alabama fans are thinking this. What is an Alabama defense going to look like without Nick Saban, one of the biggest defensive gurus out there? What's it going to look like without him? And I just want to bring up one more thing about this. You were talking about, like, we're going to find out pretty early with this secondary because they play teams like Western Kentucky. What does Western Kentucky do? Sling it all over the yard. South Florida, what do? Alex Golish going to sling it all over the yard.
And what happened last year when they played South Florida?
Right, that was a dogfight down in Tampa. And Wisconsin,
air raid. It now.
Yeah, air raid.
Who would have ever said Wisconsin air raid?
Right. So Wisconsin with Phil Longo OC, and then they get a bye week, and then they play some team called Georgia with Carson Beck. So they're going to get tested really early. And again, as an Alabama fan here, I am actually thrilled that they are playing the South Floridas, the Western Kentuckys, et cetera, to go ahead and break that secondary in quick right out of the gate.
One thing about the defense, and a couple names that haven't been brought up, and Damani Jackson was a 5-star cornerback. Obviously, he was at USC and didn't play great there, but partially I attribute that to Alex Grinch. I have an Alex Grinch hatred. I really didn't like him. I thought he was probably one of the worst defensive coordinators, let alone secondary coaches in the country. Getting him out of that, I think, is going to be good for him. He was a 5-star for a reason. The kid's incredibly talented. Keon Saab was a safety, was projected to basically start for Michigan this upcoming year. Yep. Should be another guy that can fill in nicely, brings a lot of playing experience. And Deshaun Jones, I believe he comes from Wake Forest, another guy that should be able to fill in there nicely. So it's going to take a second from the mesh, but it's not like they're coming in and having brand new starters. They're bringing guys with playing experience in here. So, yeah, there's probably going to be a little transition, but I don't think it's going to be as aggressive as people think, because some of these guys are instant impact starters.
Yeah. And they
would love to talk about Alabama.
Go ahead.
I would say would love to talk about Alabama all day, but, we would keep going here for hours. We got to talk about Georgia. Here. Georgia does not make the college football playoff last year for the first time in a couple seasons.
I'm leaving.
Carson Beck returns. Probably the best quarterback, in my opinion, to be returning since at least Matt Stafford. I think you can make a couple other cases. When looking through some of the recent starters, I could not believe some of how terrible some of these starting quarterbacks were, and they were winning 9-10 games. Carson Beck has a chance to be a Heisman Trophy candidate quarterback this year.
Yep.
His defense should be one of the best. They add Trevor Etienne. They have 9 starters returning on offense, 8 on defense, and the offensive line is just absolute units. I mean, Figgy, is there, if they lose more than one game this year, like, is that just a failure on Georgia?
I don't think it's a failure because of the schedule. Because we all know how tough Georgia's schedule is. Like, they have to play at Alabama, at Texas, Clemson to start the year. I mean, I respect Clemson. Not
neutral site game too.
Yeah, and I do think, like, I know Lance was saying, like, with Bama, he likes that Bama's going to play these teams like Western Kentucky, South Florida, that, it's not that Bama doesn't respect them, but I mean, Bama is going to beat those teams barring a natural disaster. But it's those types of games, it gives you the opportunity to learn about the closest thing you have in college to like a preseason game like we have in the NFL. And Georgia off the bat is going to have to be ready for Clemson, a very hungry Clemson team. I have to imagine, I don't know. I think sometimes maybe fans, we forget, like, these players, they're so young, like, they're connected. They know people are talking crap and, not giving them a chance and all that type of stuff. And Clemson is not bare of talent. So then you have that challenge. And then they, hopefully, if you're a dog fan like me, you hope Georgia doesn't get too beat up within those first 3 games. So Clemson, Tennessee Tech, so obviously your cupcake. but then at Kentucky. And Kentucky is like, man, they're such an interesting team like every year because you never think they're going to win the SEC, though they occasionally will win 10 or 11 games, right? But the main thing with Kentucky is they're extremely tough. And I don't think Kirby Smart's, blowing smoke up, Mark Stoops, butt when he says like every year, Kentucky's one of the toughest teams we play, So then they have their bye. So it's like, man, they have their bye before Alabama. Hopefully they're not too beat up. But, they have Bama, Auburn, as always, at Texas. Tennessee, I have seen, some publications think Tennessee's a legit playoff contender. So that means they think Tennessee could win 10 games, right?
Is that game in Tennessee or Georgia?
It's at Georgia.
It's at Georgia. So hopefully for Georgia, that's definitely huge, especially when you already have two really tough games on the road.
Yeah. And a freshman quarterback at Tennessee, not redshirt, but first-time starter.
Yep. But I could see 10-2. Definitely, knowing Georgia fans like I do, you would have some, actually probably more than some, that would be disappointed. But
they'd be calling for Kirby's head because he hasn't won a national championship since 2023.
I know. Yeah.
Or January 2023, 2022 season.
It's ridiculous. I'm still trying to get used to being one of these spoiled fan bases. But I do think if Georgia goes 10-2, yes, you will have some of the fan bases like, come on, like, what are we doing? And it would be disappointing to lose to both Alabama and Texas because for one reason, if it's Alabama and Texas, then you're going to be like, all right, we're probably playing one of those in the SEC championship game. And then you're like, all right, well, if we lose to them again, then your confidence in the playoff would probably not be very high. So those are things that I could see the fan base getting upset about. But 10-2 in this 12-team era, with how tough that schedule is on paper, I mean, that's really good. Especially what if Ole Miss pans out at, Georgia Tech looks like at least a bowl team. Kentucky, I mean, it's a really tough schedule.
Yeah, I think one thing you got going for you is Kentucky with the recent sanctions that just came out against them. Maybe they're uninspired since they have a postseason ban. Sometimes I don't know. I've never witnessed that personally. I have to think these guys have enough pride and they're on the field. And now with the transfer portal being as open as it is, if you have a postseason ban and you want to leave, this is your prove it year. You can get out and you can go. You're making a resume. So Kentucky, they're going to be tough, but you kind of hope that they're uninspired when you get to play them. But I do have something I want to ask you, Figgy. So this is true life experience that I had just the other day. So I'm a little worried about your Bulldogs.
Is it about barking at people?
It is about barking at people. So I went out for breakfast with my family the other day, and there's this guy. He was a big fella. He wasn't a big guy. He was a big fella. So if you're a fella, you're pretty big. Y'all from the South, y'all understand. Big fellas are a lot bigger than big guys. So this big fella goes up, opens the door for my wife and kids. I'm a little lagging behind because my son is kicking rocks and doing whatever. And he smile back at him. I have my Clemson hat on. He's got his Georgia paraphernalia on, narcotics, if you will. And I said, wow, all Georgia fans aren't as bad as I thought they were. He goes, no. And I said, I thought you were going to bark at me, and you didn't. He goes, no, not till next week. So I'm worried about you, Thiggy, because this Georgia fan had the opportunity to get on all fours and bark in my face, and he didn't do it. He even held the door open for me and was polite. Are you worried about that a little bit?
I am a little bit because I don't know. You hear Matthew Stafford. What was the other day? He said something about.
Does it say go dogs?
Yeah, don't say go. Come on.
I listened to the interview that it was said. It wasn't. Yeah, that's.
Guys, do we think that Georgia fans are just getting a little relaxed because they haven't lost a regular season game since the cocktail party in 2020?
Yeah. I'm telling you, had they lost a game last year, that big fella is on all fours barking at me at the top of his lungs. I'm telling you.
Figgy, how many times have you barked at somebody in your life?
On all fours.
Not on all fours. When I was in college, I do remember when Georgia played Boise State in Atlanta. I don't know. I was being a little bit of a a douche. I was barking at some of like the two Boise State fans that were there.
Yeah.
And of course, it bit me in the butt because Boise State ended up, with Kellen Moore. They beat Georgia pretty bad. That was Murray's second
I forgot
year.
about that.
That's wild, man. What's okay, Diggy? We know how it is when you go to an SEC game back when we were in college. You're sipping a little bourbon or whatever. You gotta bark at the Boise fans. That's hilarious though that you're barking at some Boise State fans.
Real quick,
they probably
I will
proud that they got barked at.
Oh yeah. Well, actually, they probably were like shocked, like because coming from Boise, Idaho.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, they probably had never seen anything like that. Like
they've never seen a green field either. That was probably shocking to see that.
Right.
I want to throw a quick question about Georgia, the guys. If y'all don't care, I would like to ask: do you think that Georgia gets back to? I know they've got Carson Beck and really good receivers on the perimeter, and Oscar Delp at tight end, replacing Brock Bowers. But to me, what they were missing last year was more of a powerful run game. And now with Trevor Etienne, this offensive line, and a healthy Branson Robinson at tailback, do you think that Georgia gets back into more of that physical brand of football that Kirby really wants to run? Obviously, they're still going to throw it around with Beck, but run the football more and get more physical at the line of scrimmage on the offensive side.
I think and sorry, Jake, I'll jump into this one. I think what they're going to do is because of the amount of talent they have, because they have studs at wide receiver, because they have studs at running back, they're just going to do what they do. And I think depending on what the matchup is, that's what's going to be exploited that week. So, yeah, Kirby wants the physicality of the game. They're going to run the football 20, 25, 30 times a game. But I think if they're playing at Clemson and they're averaging 3 yards a carry, they're not going to hold back from throwing the ball down the field. So I think with how good they are, they don't have to pigeonhole themselves. But you do make a good point because that's what they've made their hay on, right? Is being powerful and being able to out physical everybody. So I am curious to see what they do this year.
I think Trevor Etienne is one of the better running backs in the country. And I know he split time with Montrell Johnson at Florida, but I think he is an absolute stud. Obviously, his bloodline is incredible. We know what he did at Clemson. We know what he's doing in the NFL. Georgia tends to do a running back by committee, so he's not going to be called upon to be doing 25, 30 carries a game. His offensive line is absolutely massive. Tate Rutledge, Ernest Green are two guys that are going to be playing on Sundays without question. And I really think that you're going to see him have, he had 750 yards last year. Does he put up more? I don't know, because he might split carries. If they're up a lot, he's not going to be playing in second halves. Mm-hmm. But I think you're going to see some big moments out of him. I think he's going to score some crucial touchdowns. And I could see Georgia getting back to, we're going to run this down your throat. When it matters most, we need a first down. We need a couple first downs running the ball. We're going to do it. Carson Beck can get us there. But I also think that Kirby's never had a quarterback with the talent of Carson Beck. Carson Beck's got a potential to be a first-round quarterback. So when they need it, are they relying on the running back, or does he turn to his senior quarterback to make the play when it's needed? So I could see it going both ways.
Yeah, and I'm going to segue off of that, Jake. I put a take out there the other day because I'm not completely sold on Carson Beck. You have a tight end in Brock Bowers, and you have that dominant running game they usually have, and I'm not saying this because Clemson's playing them. This is completely unbiased. So watching Carson Beck, I was never wowed last year. I was never like, wow, he just took over the game. And the Auburn game highlights, just is highlighting in my brain right now. But Brock Bowers took over that game. They could not guard him. And I think Carson Beck could have put that ball anywhere and Brock Bowers is going to catch it and score. But I want to hear from y'all three. So Jake, you mentioned you think he could be a potential first-round quarterback. I honestly just don't see that with him. And I want to hear y'all's take about that.
Well, I think he could be a first-round quarterback, not just because of his talent, but with the context of the quarterback depth, or at least the perceived quarterback depth. I think he would have to play pretty poorly for him not to be a first-round pick.
For sure.
Now, in context of this season, I agree with you, Will, that Carson Beck, he has to be the leader of this team, or the leader on offense. And I agree that obviously I watched all their games. I think the Auburn game is a good example of how, it really, Carson Beck made some throws in that second half, but for the most part, it really was just the fact that Auburn finally gave up and were like, we cannot cover this freak of nature in Brock Bowers. I mean, it really was like Brock Bowers single-handedly won that game. I mean, he did. So yes, I do think that Carson Beck this year, especially with Georgia's schedule that we already talked about, he'll have to be that guy, that stud. And here's the thing, knowing how Kirby is with the media, I think it was pretty telling. And I think it was one of Dog Nation, one of their stories like a couple of weeks ago, and they had asked him about like a Heisman candidacy for Beck, and Kirby didn't deflect the question and say, "Well, I don't really want to talk about that. Like, hey, we're focused on Clemson or whatever." He said, "Look, Beck has an opportunity, but it's going to be based on how he plays." You know what I mean? So it's not like he was shying away from the fact that Beck has an opportunity to put himself in the Heisman race this year and be a legit Heisman contender at Georgia for, the first time in a very long time. I know, love you, Stetson. I know Stetson was he was a finalist, but come on, there's no way he was going to win. But Beck is legit, but he has to prove it. I think he'll have to maybe it's Texas or Bama. Beck will have to show he can make some gutsy plays, to really help Georgia get back to winning maybe 3 titles in 4 years. So.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely going to have a chance too with the fact that they've got those big marquee matchups with Clemson, at Texas, at Ole Miss, at Bama, Tennessee, et cetera. Like, he's going to have a lot of marquee matchups that's going to be, like, if they make it to the SEC championship game, et cetera, that he's going to have a shot, obviously, to win the Heisman. The interesting thing that you brought up there, Will, with that Auburn game, I'm pretty sure that was like his first ever road start was in Jordan-Hare Stadium, and we know how that place can get rocking, especially when Bama, Georgia, et cetera, come in there for those big games. But as the year went on, you guys were talking about how Milroe, Thiggy brought it up, but how Milroe, improved down the stretch last year. I mean, Beck did that as well. I mean, he lit up Tennessee in Knoxville, Ole Miss in that game against Ole Miss in Athens. Really the only game down the stretch that he kind of struggled in was obviously that big game against Bama in the SEC championship game. But I definitely think, because also of the depth of the quarterback as far as going into the NFL draft, that Beck would have to really, really struggle to play himself out of being like a first-round type quarterback, just because of the depth overall with this class going into the NFL.
So one of the other primary playoff contenders here is Ole Miss. Last year, Lane Kiffin helps Ole Miss have one of their best seasons in history. And the big story for Ole Miss was the transfer portal this past year. They go get Walter Nolan. They go get Prince. I can't even say his dude's last name. You may. Yeah. How? Somebody help me. Anybody? Nobody. Okay. The defensive end from Florida, who is clearly their best defensive end. They get Chris Hartle from Jacksonville State. He had 16 tackles for loss. They lose Quinshon Judkins, but they go basically recreate him and get Henry Parrish back, Logan Diggs, Rashad Amos, who had 1,000 yards at Miami. They go and get multiple offensive linemen. They go get Juice Wells from South Carolina.
Judas Wells.
So they go out and they get and address needs that they had. Their defense was in the top 50 of scoring, but when you go and look at it, there were a lot of stats that showed that maybe this defense was doing a lot of bend but don't break. They were 70th or worse in total defense, pass defense, rush defense, turnovers, completion percentage, and they were 52nd in yards per carry. So they could bring in 25 guys. To me, this is you pushed all your coins into the middle. You went all in on this pot. You have Jackson Dart coming back, knowing that there's a good chance he's going pro. I don't know if he's got another year or not. He might. Everybody's got an extra year somehow. Yeah. If Cam Rising's got an 8-year, Jackson Dart probably has another year as well. Lance, does this feel like Lane Kiffin went all in, saying it's a 12-team playoff? I'm going to find a way to make myself into the playoff this year.
Yeah, I do. And my boy Tyler Noe, that's on our podcast, that's my partner on our podcast, he said this when the new schedules were starting to come out with these new conferences with all the conference realignment. He was talking about how teams can look at their schedule in advance. Like, the SEC did the whole thing where they've scheduled for the 2 years and you just flip flop where you go play each other. You can do a thing now where you look and see, okay, who do I have coming back on this roster and who are we playing this year? And you can do exactly what you just said that Ole Miss did, put all of their chips in the middle of the table and throw all of their money in NIL that they possibly have and go get as many people as you can, because they looked at their schedule this year. They have one of the easiest schedules of all the contenders in the SEC this year. And you can go get guys like Walter Nolan, Juice Wells, et cetera, that you talked about. And I mean, I think Ole Miss has got the goods this year, guys. Like, I'm not scared to say that I'm buying the hype with this team. If you really look at this roster, this starting group especially, I mean, it's as talented as most rosters in the entire country, this starting group. A lot of people are a little hesitant to want to buy in because you get scared of, like, buying the hype of teams because of like how Texas burnt people so many years, how Miami has burnt people so many years. But eventually, like Texas last year, they put up a really good year.
Yeah.
And Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss has had multiple good years. He's had some of the best years in program history with significantly less talent than he's got this year. Well, we all know how Kiffin can dial it up on offense. Guys, you just talked about the running back room. I mean, the receiving group, the tight end, Dart back at quarterback. I just don't know how you're going to stop this offense. I don't. You're going to have to hope that this defense is, again, putting up some of the numbers that you just threw out, that they're not as strong on defense, because this offense is going to be ridiculous this year.
And to add to that, the Joe Moore Award was given to Washington, I believe, last year,
Yep.
the offensive best offensive line in the country. And Lane Kiffin went and got 2 of those guys off that offensive line, and Julius Bulow and Nate Kalepo. So, yeah, they're transfer guys, but these guys played together. So you have 2 guys who already have experience playing together. They're not next to each other. They're working with the center. And they also have one of my favorite running backs. So, everyone wanted to talk about Quinshawn Judkins last year, but Jake, you'll remember this name because he was one of my favorites last year. Ulysses Bentley IV, which is 100% the best name in college football.
Law
comes
firm.
back. Yeah,
I'll take General Booty, actually.
General Booty. Oh yeah, General Booty is up there. He's a phenomenal running back too, and he's got a lot of talent. And it's going to be very helpful when teams can't load the box, because you have to worry about Juice Wells. You have to worry about Prescorn, the tight end. You have to worry about Michael Davis. Yeah, what are you going to do? Like, you're never going to load the box against him. And to come back to what Lance said, the defense. Yes, they replaced, 6 starters on defense with transfers. They're highly talented guys. They're transferring for a reason. Why are they transferring? Are they transferring to Ole Miss because they couldn't play where they were? They weren't getting what they wanted? Or do they really, truly believe that this team could win a national championship? And to talk about Lane Kiffin, I think Lane Kiffin is modern-day Steve Spurrier. He is not afraid to say what in the world is on his mind at all times, no matter what. Twitter, media days, interviews. He is always speaking very authentically, and I think he's purposely trying to get jabs and piss people off. In a world where coaches, we have coach speak where no one wants to put bulletin board material up, no one wants to poke the bear. This guy's posting a video of Juice Wells running routes with 2001 playing in the background, which is what South Carolina plays before they kick off. I love it. I love it. I'm not the biggest fan of Lane Kiffin, but I do love that he's that heel of college football, is not afraid to get in the dirt with anybody. And I did love him, no matter who it was, and what he said to Paul Feinbaum 2 years in a row when they sat them next to each other. And I would pay money to watch that over and over and over again.
Figgy, so NIL is obviously a big thing now, and one name that is not on this team anymore is Quinshawn Judkins. And I'd love to hear, so they were able to basically take that money. There was a lot of rumors that Quinshawn Judkins wanted a lot of money, lots and lots of money. It seems like if they were able to repurpose that money into these other guys, not that they're going to miss Quinshawn Judkins because he had some really high but really low moments over the last couple of years. It seems like it might be almost a win-win situation. He probably finds a better situation, and Ole Miss seems like they probably get more contributors out of the money that they would have had to basically commit to him.
Yeah, I would agree. Look at it. We were just talking about with the defense. Listen, I apologize if I'm bringing up, my experiences as a Georgia fan a little bit too much here, but just perspective on Ole Miss. I watched that game last year. One of my best friends, his wife went to Ole Miss. And so, we were expecting to have a really fun time watching this game together because, I thought it would go down to the wire. And that's not what happened. Georgia or Alabama is a little bit different teams because, Georgia's defense just played lights out as well. But at the same time, you're like, man, Ole Miss can't stop anybody. And when they beat LSU, they won, but they didn't really stop LSU.
LSU didn't stop anybody either. So
right. So it's just like that defense, they needed for this year. They're kind of like the New York Jets, maybe. They're like trying to buy a championship potentially, or at least a really deep playoff run. And that's something that, this is a program that's really never done that. Their last SEC championship was back in the 60s. They've never made it to the SEC championship game. So I think that NIL, being able to disperse those dollars and get you some really what seems to be top of the line starters on defense to fill some of those holes and replace some of those players that were part of the deficiency on defense. It's a win-win for Ole Miss. That's why I'm really drinking the Kool-Aid to an extent. I believe in Ole Miss this year. I will mention, Jackson Dart to me, kind of like how Will was saying his perspective on Carson Beck. Jackson Dart to me, he's proven he's a good quarterback, but I'd like to see him maybe win a game, hopefully not against Georgia, but, to a team like that, and yeah, so they play LSU again, right? And LSU, even though people are kind of not really, putting them in the top 10, top 5, they're still projected to push for playoff contention. So, make those plays that SEC and national championship contending quarterbacks make. So, but yeah, I believe in Ole Miss.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And Lance said earlier, the schedule sets up very well. They avoid Alabama. They avoid Texas. They get Oklahoma and Georgia at home. They get Kentucky at home. Their away games being Arkansas, Florida, and South Carolina and LSU. So LSU is the only one that really sticks out there with, wow, that's a really good team. Maybe somebody surprises us this year. Maybe there's always a team that jumps up that we're not expecting. But on the surface level, that's where it is. And your non-conference being Furman, Middle Tennessee, Georgia Southern, and Wake Forest. They should go 4-0 there. Meaning that if they lose to both Georgia and either Oklahoma or LSU 10-2, they should still be in the playoff. And I'm guessing the consensus between all of us is that there's guaranteed 3 SEC teams in. Probably a really good chance of 4. I have a really hard time thinking that 5 find their way in just because there's too many losses that are going to happen over the course. Too many teams are going to beat each other up. I don't know if we'll see a 9-3 team in there. And I think 1 or 2 upsets could really hamper a team. If you lose to a team that's 6-6, is the committee going to hold that against you when you're 9-3 versus a 10-2 team? So,
hey, and speaking of the schedule, Jake, $5. Lane Kiffin makes a reference to Florida State losing to Middle Tennessee that week of the game. $5. Someone's going to say, "Oh, Middle Tennessee, are you looking past it?" He's going to say, "No." Take notes from my guy Mike Norvell, Florida State. Don't want to lose to them. Guarantee he's going to say something like that.
He probably will. He always finds a way to pick on some coaches. He finds his favorite targets and just finds a way to just poke little needles in there and just be a pester in their side. Typically, he sticks with the SEC, but he always tries to pick on guys that are same level. He would make some comments about Saban, but I think there was more out of a respect thing for him. And just
Shane Beamer's his voodoo doll right now.
Yes.
Jake, may I make one other note on Ole Miss with their schedule? So I disagree a little bit. I think if Ole Miss goes 10-2, and let's say, I don't know, the 2 losses are to Georgia and Oklahoma or LSU, say LSU or Oklahoma at least go, win 9 or 10 games. I still think because of how weak the non-conference schedule is, depending on what happens, obviously in the Big Ten, ACC, some of these other conferences, I don't know if that, they're going to be guaranteed to be in the playoff. Georgia's different just because of how tough their schedule is. So that's my only thing. And I'll be curious to see, this is not just an Ole Miss, I guess, an example, but just in this 12-team playoff, I'll be curious to see how the committee judges non-conference play. Because at the end of the day, like, yes, 10-2 would be a fantastic record. Yes, you're in the SEC, but that's a pretty terrible non-conference schedule, just like how Georgia last year played a really weak non-conference schedule. So I'm just curious to see how that works out.
Yeah.
You know, the bubble, there's a bubble at 4, there was a bubble at 2, there's going to be a bubble at 12 or 11 what is it? 7, since, you know, you had the 4 conference winners and then the 5th with the best.
I'm very excited for like the bubble watch all season.
Bubble watch is going to be fun.
Moving on to Auburn here. So Auburn last year was obviously Hugh Freeze's first season. Rush defense was not good. They allowed 88, or they were 88th in yards per carry. They really don't have much returning. Lance, do you think that Auburn is on the rise this year? Do you think that we see a jump from production, or do you think they're still like a year away?
I think we see a jump in production. I think as far as like jumping up to that maybe like 10 win range type team type year, I don't think that's this year. But you can look at this schedule with, when we all know this, the roster turnover that he had to do from the pieces of trash that he had to pick up from the Brian Harsin.
You're telling me Brian Harsin wasn't a phenomenal coach?
Yeah, just what an awful hire that was, man. That was that was such a head scratcher to begin with. But I mean, old brother Hugh he's recruiting his butt off. The talent differential there now on this roster with all 3 tailbacks back, with Keandre Lambert-Smith they brought in from Penn State, Robert Woods, a receiver they brought in from Georgia State that was an over 1,000-yard receiver at Georgia State. They signed 2 big-time 5-star recruits. One of them is named Cam Coleman. Probably get to more on him here in a minute. And they've got a couple of other high-rated 4-stars, so they've upgraded just talent level overall at the skill position group. I mean, when you look at this schedule, you could see 8-4 with this team this year. And yes, you could pick it apart and look at 6-6, 7-5, etc. But I just think that this year with this Auburn team, with Hugh Freeze doing what he does best and calling plays again, I mean, which Auburn team are we going to see though? You mentioned like last year. What a weird team Auburn was last year. They had Georgia and Bama on the ropes, like all but beat both of those teams. And they lose to New Mexico State. Like, not only lose, get waxed by Diego Pavia and New
got
Mexico
embarrassed
at home and Jordan. Yeah. So what a weird year it was last year. So which team are they going to be? Are they that team? Are they going to be extremely inconsistent, up and down, etc.? But they get like 8 home games this year in Jordan-Hare, and it wouldn't shock me at all if they win every single one of those, because they're obviously tough to beat at home, but playing at Alabama, at Missouri, at Georgia, I mean, those are 3 obviously brutal games. But
Diego Pavia is coming to town, though.
That's right. That's right.
Diego Pavia is coming to town, so he might do it again.
And the offensive coordinator from New Mexico State in that game is Vandy's new offensive coordinator as well.
I love that.
Never know.
That's right. But I think that Auburn is on the rise. It may not be again this year, but they might be another. They're just stockpiling talent left and right there. And we all know that Freeze is going to continue to recruit well. And that's hard for me to say as an Alabama grad, but it's true. They're recruiting their butt off there right now.
And I'll add, Hugh Freeze is a changed man. He's now Baptist Pew Hugh.
Brother Hugh.
Brother Hugh. He went up to Liberty, changed his life. He's not texting prostitutes off of a burner phone anymore. So now, if he can stay out of trouble, because he never. All jokes aside, he didn't have any trouble winning in the SEC when he was at Ole Miss. I mean, he beat Alabama. Mm-hmm. He was able to recruit really well. Ole Miss was trending up, and then he just walked himself right up out of there. So. Can Hugh Freeze stay out of his own way? I think so. But to reiterate y'all's point, did they do enough for that defense? Do they have an identity? Like you said, there's a little Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde with last year, like with them losing to New Mexico State. And I wanted to say, like, they were in 1-score games against Georgia, Ole Miss, and Alabama. And Alabama, they lost. whatever that corner was doing, I have no idea. In the corner that ends, I believe Isaiah Bond by himself. But either way, I am very curious to see what Hugh Freeze is able to do, especially with Peyton Thorne coming back, Cam Coleman. Cam Coleman is going to be somebody who's going to be fed the football this year. And based off what he did in the spring game, again, it's a spring game, and he's against Auburn's defense. So is it an indictment on Auburn's defense, or is Cam Coleman that good? I think Cam Coleman is that good. So Auburn was a fringe dark horse walk-on team of mine. But I'm just not convinced with that defense. I just can't get behind the defense in Auburn.
That's definitely the weakness of the team this year, Will. There's no doubt, is the defense. Yeah. And they brought in DJ Durkin from Texas A&M to be the new DC. So interesting to see what kind of changes are made there.
Yeah.
Jake, want to hear your thoughts on Peyton Thorne, because I am not huge on Peyton Thorne. I don't believe that Peyton Thorne is going to be able to win them games by himself. And as bipolar as this team was, they have a rough stretch right in the middle where they go against Oklahoma at home, at Georgia, at Mizzou, at Kentucky, and then they get Diego Pavia at home. So that 4-game stretch right there in the middle, to me, Peyton Thorne's got to do something. They have to win one of those games somehow. And away at Georgia, away at Mizzou, Kentucky seems like the most likely. Oklahoma at home seems more likely than the middle two. Peyton Thorne's got to step up and throw for more than 1,700 yards in a full season, right?
Yeah, and this will be his second year in that system, and correct me if I'm wrong, Auburn didn't use the transfer portal and get another quarterback, correct?
They should have.
They chose not to, though. They chose not to. That's what Hugh Freeze said.
Right, exactly. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, I'll give Hugh the benefit of the doubt right now and say that he believes that Peyton Thorne will take that next step. Now, anybody that thinks, like some Auburn fan account on Twitter I saw the other day said that they believe he could take a Joe Burrow leap in year 2. All right, let's not go crazy. I don't know what.
I'm going to take a leap into my Lambo ttoo.
Yeah.
I'm just like, all right, come on.
And Steve Sarkisian doesn't use NIL to recruit.
He's Star's got Lambos out front, and people are signing deals, but they don't come here for the cars.
But yeah, I just think I do think Peyton Thorne has potential to take that step, and a lot of that has
that Joe Burrow step.
No. Sorry, a step. No, not a step. Yeah, a step. I was saying I think that's crazy, but what's not crazy, I do believe that if you as a fan, if you're an Auburn fan, if you trust Hugh Freeze, so you can sit there and say, all right, Hugh believes in this guy, taking that step in year 2 in his offense. So, I'll give Hugh the benefit of the doubt, and another thing too is like, Peyton Thorne, this will be his 4th year, right? I mean, so that experience, and we've seen examples where, I'm not saying he's Michael Penix either, but we've seen examples where these guys get into a system they're comfortable in, and they get with a coach that is just a good fit, the right match for them, and they excel, and I believe Peyton Thorne has that potential, but I don't know if he's good enough to win games, though. So that means for Auburn to take that step, it'll have to be the talent around him. He'll have to not make bad mistakes. That freshman receiver will have to step up. But then the defense will have to work out, when they're playing on paper, Oklahoma and some of these teams that, are going to try and score a bunch of points. Will Auburn's defense keep them in games? That's a big question.
And Lance, you made this point earlier about the schedule. And when you look at their schedule, they go to Georgia, to Alabama, to Missouri. They know that those teams are coming to them next year. Was it wise for them to go and invest in that, or should they, let their players grow? And it seems like there's a chance Hugh Freeze might have looked at that as well and said, this isn't the year. There are too many tough games on the schedule that we'll try to improve, but this isn't the year to try to go all in. We need to let our guys grow. The Cam Colemans of, let him get his feet wet, let him get going. But his sophomore year is where he's going to explode. His freshman year, he'll help us play, he'll help us win, but he's not going to be, an All-American in freshman year. Typically, most guys aren't All-Americans freshman year. But when you have guys and that you're losing a bunch of players, we'll take our blows in year 2. We'll recruit well. We'll show improvements, and then we'll come back in 2025. And I feel like there's a really good chance he took that opportunity.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I mean, he actually was kind of quoted saying that the market for some of these quarterbacks that were in the portal were just too high, in his opinion, for these types of quarterbacks that he was going to go after. And look, again, as an Alabama fan here, I don't want to look at the glass half full for Auburn, but a glass half full view here on Peyton Thorne is we saw what he did at Michigan State when he actually had the talent around him that first year he started at Michigan State when they won like 11 games that year. Last year, Peyton Thorne came in after spring ball. He came in during the summer to a transition year with.
That's what Joe Burrow also did.
Yeah, true. But he came in during the summer, a transitional year for new coaches, etc. Not a good roster around him. And he also went through 2 different play callers in the same season. Philip Montgomery was calling plays the first half of the season, and then Hugh Freeze called plays the second half of the year. This is his first entire off-season, spring ball, summer, etc. He's got a lot more weapons around him. If he can't get it done this year, then he just can't get it done. But I do think that, again, a glass half full thing, looking at it, if you're an Auburn fan, would be what I'm just talking about there. A lot more weapons and more time in this, like getting more comfortable in the system, like Diggy said.
This just in, Lance calls it Auburn fan.
1,000%. 1,000%.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, I think Auburn, real quick, I think Auburn is I think we'll write an article about this. I really think Auburn's one of those teams that has like the largest gap between their floor and ceiling. Mm-hmm. And some of that has to do with what we're talking about. Like there is potential, but there's uncertainty in several key spots. But then the schedule, your schedule indicates a lot of times, how far you can improve from year to year. So especially if you have majority of the same guys, So yeah, I do think there's kind of a big gap. Auburn could crash and burn and be 5-7 again, or 6-6. Or I could see them 8-4 and maybe an upset away from 9-3. Like that's just how I feel about them.
Speaking of teams needing to improve, Florida arguably has the toughest schedule in college football. Plays something like 7 or 8 ranked teams this year.
Yeah.
An absolute brutal schedule for them this year. Graham Mertz returns. There's plenty of people thinking DJ Lagway is going to get some time this year. I'm sure we'll see on the field. Defense was not good. Finished 92nd in sacks and lost the guy who had 7 of them to Ole Miss. The next leading one had 2.5. So clearly they need to improve their defensive production. They do use the transfer portal, go get a couple wide receivers, one from Arizona State, one from Wisconsin. Both they've combined about 3,000 yards over the last 2 seasons. Eugene Wilson returned. Montrell Johnson returns. Lance, this is obviously a very, very difficult schedule. Billy Napier has a very tough job in front of him. Does Florida make a bowl game this year?
I think they do. We talked about it on our most recent episode that my boy Tyler Noe and I both like this Florida team to make a bowl game this year. And I know, of course, everybody is talking about this daunting schedule, and rightfully so. But a lot of people aren't talking about the fact that this roster, talent-wise, when you look at some of these teams that they're playing, especially in the swamp, I mean, it's the freaking swamp. That is one of the toughest places to play in the country. They're just as talented or more talented than several of these teams that everybody's talking about. What a brutal, tough schedule, etc. Like Miami coming in week 1. Florida doesn't have to take a back seat to Miami in the swamp. They don't have to take a backseat, obviously, to UCF in the swamp, etc. There's teams on this schedule that they can beat. And yes, we could look at it and see that this could be like, again, ceiling floor. We can look at it and see that this team could be a 3-9 football team with this brutal schedule that they've got. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I think this is a 6-6, possibly even 7-5 type team this year. Florida played, besides Iowa State, Florida played more freshmen last year than anybody in the country. Florida's freshmen played the second most snaps in the entire country as far as freshmen across the board and across the entire country. So a lot of those guys obviously are back. I love what they did with the Elijah Badger pickup from Arizona State that you just alluded to. I mean, that guy's explosive on the perimeter. They just got to get better on defense, man. Austin Armstrong's got to figure out a way to get that defense playing better football this year because they were so bad last year. But I think that this Florida team can get to 6-6 this year. I've already actually personally taken their win total over 4.5. I took a shot at it.
Well, and Lance, to go on your defensive comment, I think Florida had, I want to say it was 10 season-ending injuries on the defense last year. It was like some ungodly amount. Mm-hmm. And I think if they stay healthy, that defense could make a huge leap. And people might think, oh, wow, like what did they do to replace all that talent? What is the coaching doing? I think it's the fact that you might have guys healthy in there and you have depth. I cannot stress depth enough, especially in a conference like the SEC, and especially at your defensive line when you have to rotate guys. Like guys that's hot, especially the first half of the season. Them boys ain't 200 pounds. They're 250 pounds, 280 pounds, 300 pounds. And I forget the one cat's name who's about 400 pounds and wears 21. That just does not look right to me. But to add to your point, Florida's extremely talented. And if their defense stays healthy, we might be talking about Florida in a much different light. And I'm not going to go too far into that. Again, no spoilers.
Figgy, what are your thoughts on Florida for this upcoming year?
Listen, I want Florida to get better because it makes the cocktail party a lot better, at least more fun. I'll say I do believe that Florida is at least going to go 6-6. And I think they kind of are another one of those boomer bust teams that potentially could be really bad. And a lot of that could be because of the schedule. It also could be because they seem to have a cultural issue or just, I don't know if that's the right term, but just something has not been clicking under Napier. And if it doesn't click this year, we might see Lane Kiffin in Gainesville.
Ooh,
maybe not. But you were talking about Lane Kiffin and Spurrier. I don't know. I kind of can make that connection.
Oh, yeah.
But for this year, I'll say that I do think that people forget how talented Florida is. Like, no, they don't have the depth of Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State. But I think I saw, it was like right before, we started this podcast, I think I looked at like the 247 composite rankings. And I know that's not everything, when it comes to talent, but it's a good parameter. And it says that Florida has, I think, the 12th most talented roster this year. And so that's going to put them in contention with just about every team they're going to play on their schedule, including this new big bad Ole Miss we're talking about. Like, their talent level overall will be good enough to beat your Ole Miss, your Tennessee, your A&M. So I think a lot of it's going to have to do with Mertz. We keep talking about these quarterbacks, like, can they win games? Can they take steps, to improve their teams? Mertz was actually very efficient last year. So I think he is definitely a candidate for a guy that could take a pretty big leap. Not Joe Burrow. I'm not going crazy.
A step, not the step.
Yeah. But to take a big leap in your second year as the starter and help your team win a few games or stay in contention. So I think they have a great chance. Miami, that's the indicator. If they lose to Miami, especially if Miami, I don't think is going to beat them bad. I think if Miami wins, it would be a close fought game. But let's just say Miami is like matching up with all the hype you're hearing about them. If they go into the swamp and beat Florida, that's a bad start for the Gators. It's a bad start, especially when you have A&M in 2 weeks. That's a losable game as well. It's like then you're starting 1-2. I don't know.
I think when you look at this schedule up through the end of October, every single one of those games are winnable. Miami, Samford, A&M, Mississippi State, UCF, Tennessee, Kentucky. Doesn't matter where you play those, they are winnable. And most of those games are at home. When you get to November, it's a completely different story. Especially when you start off going Georgia, Texas, back-to-back. LSU's got question marks. There's a chance that they could win that. They got that game at home. You don't know what Garrett Nussmeier is going to be. Ole Miss, we've talked about it. They brought a lot of transfer portal guys in, but they also get them at home. Florida State, end of the year, a lot of new guys. DJU is the quarterback. I look at this schedule, and the only two that stick out to me are like, there's no way they're winning these two games are Georgia and Texas because Georgia's just better, and Texas is in Austin. I don't think they really have a chance to beat either of those two teams. Everyone else in here, I don't want to say that they've got a chance, but I would say that their chances are not zero. They at least have a puncher's chance when you look at the rest of the schedule. And part of it, like you said, comes down to Miami. If Miami does somehow walk into the swamp and beats them by 3 touchdowns, it's going to be a very long season in Gainesville. But if they pull out a win, all bets are off.
Yeah, and since you touched on it, Jake, I'll jump back in. A lot of the tough teams that Florida are playing are identity teams. Who is Miami? We don't know. Like, yes, they're ranked in the top 25 this year, but what is Cam Ward going to do in the ACC?
Cam Ward led the league in fumbles last year, so you never know. He has a couple costly fumbles at the wrong time.
Yeah, what's he going to look like in the swamp with that atmosphere opening game of the year?
Especially how hot it's going to be. I mean, good God, that's brutal what they did to these boys. But who is Miami? Miami is so ebb and flow. Who is Texas A&M with Mike Elko? What are they going to be? What Kentucky is going to show up? Is it going to be an inspired Kentucky, or is it going to be zombies because they don't have any playoff hopes? LSU, they have a new quarterback. They don't have Jaden Daniels to save them. When everything breaks down. So what is LSU going to be? Is LSU's defense going to improve? Their defense was atrocious last year. Florida State with DJU. Which DJU is going to show up? Is it 5-star DJU or is it mediocre transfer DJU? You never know. And then you have Samford and Mississippi State. Like Ole Miss. Is Ole Miss's defense going to step it up? There's so many identity teams on here that have a lot to prove. And we're so quick to write off Florida before they've even played a snap this year. There was an article that came out today that's talking about, hey, Napier's already lost his job, and he's just there for whatever reason until they can find somebody new. I think that's bullcrap. I think Billy Napier is a good coach. He had Louisiana Lafayette winning bowl games. Who's done that? And we're so quick to write these guys off. That's a good point, Figgy. So UK can play in the postseason technically, so it has not. They haven't banned them yet. So thank you for that heads up. But we're so quick to say they have the hardest schedule in the nation. Everybody just wants to repeat that over and over and over again. A lot of those guys are question marks too. So I think Florida has a legitimate chance. I actually have Florida winning 8 games this year. And I even stood on it. I put it on Twitter. I want to see it happen. Billy Napier's coaching for his job. This dude's got pride. He's got some Clemson tutelage. So he's got some Roy Bus in him. I cannot wait to see this Florida team shock the nation. And I think if they win more than 6 games, the amount of hype that they're going to get, Billy Napier is going to have his job locked in for at least the next 3 years.
So want to loop these last 3 teams in here because I think the general consensus is that Vanderbilt, South Carolina, and Mississippi State are all going to be bottom feeders in the conference this year. They're all going to be struggling to potentially make a bowl game. Vanderbilt and South Carolina could be looking for new coaches. Jeff Lebby is in his first year at Mississippi State of a completely brand new team. Blake Shapen takes over a quarterback. They've got almost nobody left there. Lenore Sellers has attempted 4 passes, all completions. I will say that. But Robbie Ashford's their backup. It sounds like the Sellers is likely going to start. And Vanderbilt has Diego Pavia, and they are Vanderbilt. Out of those 3 teams, who do you think has the best season by their own terms?
I'll let South Carolina. South Carolina. I think Lenora Sellers is a very talented quarterback. I mean, yeah, he had 4 passes last year. They were against Furman, whoop-de-doo. But he is a very, very talented quarterback. He was coming out of South Florence, which is in the middle of the state. Shout out the armpit of South Carolina. But Nick Harbor's been there for a year. Maybe he's learned the offense at this point. They have a really legitimately good freshman tight end that just came in, and Michael Smith. He's in there beating their senior stud safety, Nick Emenware, at practice. And they're putting it on film, which I'm like, why would you put that out there? You don't want to see your stud getting beat by a freshman. And they do have a lot coming back on that defense. I thought, we had a Beer Ball and Banner episode a few weeks ago, and I thought I was going to be able to sit there and bash South Carolina, so we threw them on the over-under win total list. I actually have them winning 6 or 7 games. So everyone's written South Carolina off, especially with how bad their offensive line was last year. That entire offensive line came back. Yes, they were bad, but they were majority freshmen. They were majority – I think they had 5 injuries on the offensive line last year. So we talk about Florida with the injury bug. South Carolina had the same one. Plus, South Carolina gets the running back from Arkansas, and his name is slipping my mind right now.
Rocket Sanders, baby.
Rocket Sanders, and that dude is a freaking stud. Yeah. So I really think that South Carolina is going to play spoiler to a lot of people this year, and this like feels like absolute dirt coming out of my mouth. So just I really am sorry. I'm going to wash my mouth out with soap after I say this, hand sanitizer, whatever. I really think South Carolina is going to play spoiler to a lot of people this year. Lenora Sellers is going to have his growing pains. It's going to be tough. I don't think you can write him off as easily as people want to. Plus, Williams-Brice Stadium is a really tough place to play. Say that 5 times fast. Ole Miss is coming there. That is going to be a night game. Williams-Brice Stadium has their away team locker room right next to the student section. And trust me from experience, it is not a safe place to be for anybody coming to town. So, again, I really think South Carolina is going to be better. It hurts me to say this, but I think out of those 3 teams that you brought up, Jake, I think South Carolina has the best odds to do something.
Yeah, I just think that Mississippi State's just climbing way too far uphill with like they're one of the least like returning production teams like overall in the entire country. And not only that, if you want to go into coaching, Jeff Levy obviously never been a head coach. Coleman Hustler, the defensive coordinator, has never been a coordinator. Now he's their new defensive coordinator. So I think Shapen's going to do a good job at QB, but I just think they're fighting too much of an uphill battle there in year one. And I agree that's got to be South Carolina. You made a good point there, Will, with far as like getting games at Williams-Brice there in that good old sandstorm atmosphere, getting LSU at home, Ole Miss at home, and Missouri at home, and Texas A&M. They get all 4 of those teams at Williams-Brice. I could see them playing spoiler to one of those teams at least this year at home. And last year, South Carolina was one of the worst teams in the country at running the football. They were dead last in the SEC at running the football. They were historically bad at running the football. Part of that was due to, like you said, the offensive line. They had some injuries at tailback, etc. The addition of Rocket Sanders and bringing back members of this offensive line, I do think could make it to where South Carolina does get somewhere, like you just said, somewhere around the 6-win mark, etc. So I think that, I do think that Shane Beamer and South Carolina are the team between the 3 that you just mentioned, Jake, that could make a little bit of noise, as in like bowl game.
What you Figgy?
Yeah, I have to agree. South Carolina, I'm actually going to miss playing South Carolina or Georgia playing South Carolina. I'm only an hour. Augusta's only an hour from Columbia. And so that was always a fun game. And I agree with you. Williams-Brice is a crazy place to play. People talk about, I guess, outside of some of the bigger stadiums, like, and of teams like in Alabama, Georgia, LSU, that have won national titles over the last several years. Like, people talk about Auburn a lot and Jordan Hare, but Williams-Brice is underrated. So I agree that like their schedule sets up well for them. And I also think this, I don't think Shane Beamer's going to get fired unless they went like 2-10, something like that, which isn't going to happen. But he's recruiting very well. But back-to-back 5-7 seasons, I think it could put him on the hot seat next year. So getting to 6 wins at least, I think it is important for Shane Beamer in South Carolina.
Yep.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here just because we can't have all 4 of us saying the same one. I actually think Mississippi State, I do love me some Daniel Pavia, but no, Vanderbilt's just too bad. I think Mississippi State is going to upset somebody this year. I also think Jeff Levy is going to try to ruffle some feathers. I think he's going to try to make a name for himself in this season. And they get a couple games. They start with Eastern Kentucky, Arizona State away, but Arizona State kind of sucks as well. Toledo at home, who doesn't have Daquan Finn anymore. Home against Florida, we talked about. I don't know what that's going to be at that point. I think they're going to upset somebody. I don't think it's Texas. I don't think it's Georgia. But if you told me that they beat Missouri at home at the end of the year, I'd believe that. I think that you could see Jeff Levy pulling some tricks out of his sleeve towards the end of the year. The dude knows how to run an offense. We've seen it. We've seen him be able to run an offense, whether it's at UCF, whether it's at Ole Miss, whether it's at Oklahoma. The dude knows how to run an offense. And I think Blake Shapen is going to be that style of quarterback that he needs. And you give him 11 games, 10 games to get it started, get it warmed up. I could see their last home game, or I could see them winning the Egg Bowl. I could see some weird stuff happening. You never know. We've seen guys lose games because they were a dog and tried to pee on the floor. and then their kicker misses the extra point. I'm not saying it's going to be pretty this year, but I think that the end of the year we're going to look at Mississippi State and go, you know what, give Jeff Lebby a year or two, and this could be a force in the SEC. I could see them, being an 8 or 10 win team in the next 2 or 3 years. So I think there'll be reason for optimism at the end of the season. So I'm going to take Mississippi State out of those 3.
Well, Jake, I think that was a good point with their non-conference. It's unlikely a team with a new head coach, basically new, like Lance was saying, new defensive coordinators, never coached or never been in that position. It's too much to say they're going to go 4-0 in the non-conference, but I think they're good enough that they could, the teams that they're playing. So let's just say they did go 4-0 in non-conference, then you're right. Like, they have potential to maybe upset a Missouri at home, and then they're playing for a bowl in the Egg Bowl. So
Sam Pittman might not be employed by Arkansas at that point. So if you count that as one more, they just got to find one more win in there to find a bowl game. And honestly, I'm selling myself on Missouri, even though I just put out today that I think Luther Burden makes the Heisman ceremony. So,
well, and don't make Texas a lock. Texas has flaws. I mean, we talked about their defensive backfield last week. They were 90th in the nation last year, 100th in the nation. They were very, very bad in pass defense, and they didn't do much to replace it. So
Jeff Lebby played against them last year.
So you want to talk about a team they could upset? I think they could upset the Longhorns last year. I mean, I think the Longhorns are very good, but I think everyone focuses so hard on Quinn Ewers and that offense, they forget how bad that defense was truly last year.
Guys, last thing I want to say about Mississippi State that we all need to realize is the most important thing on this schedule. I've seen you guys tweet out from your Walk On Redshirts account about like the love for the old Pac-12 after dark, RIP. They got to give us Mississippi State in the desert at Arizona State on September the 7th at about 10:30 Eastern.
Oh yeah, no, that's got to be a 30 kick. I need a reason to stay up until
I want that late
in the morning.
Late as can be, sitting on the couch, sipping a little bourbon late at night after the kids have gone to bed. That's what we need. Mississippi State at Arizona State, Saturday, September.
And that's where it gets weird.
That's where it gets weird. On that last glass of bourbon, hey, I'll be up in a minute. I'm coming to bed, babe. I promise. One more glass of whiskey. Let me just watch a little bit of this football game. Boom.
We're in double overtime.
You're in double overtime at 3 a.m.
Yep.
All right, so let's jump into our walk-on teams of the year. So if you haven't been listening, these are teams that we think are going to improve based off of win totals, projections. Doesn't mean that they're going to be college football playoff teams. Just means that whatever is current, the perception is we think they're going to be significantly better than that. Thiggy and Lance weren't in last week. It's been like 8 teams this week, and I don't think either of them are picking Vanderbilt, and Alabama and Georgia are kind of cheating. We'll let them pick from everybody. So, William, why don't you start us off?
All right, Jake, I got to go Florida. So I'm standing on business with Florida. I put it out there. I think they're winning 8 games. If they stay healthy on defense, I think that defense takes a huge step forward. I already talked about the schedule. Yes, it's a very difficult schedule, but it's not set in stone to be the number one toughest schedule at the end of the year. I think Graham Mertz, y'all alluded to it. He was very efficient. I think he only threw 3 interceptions last year. Is that right, Jake? And he lost one head of the 2-headed running back last year, but he gets his second one back. And Justice Boone, shout out Sumter boy, Sumter High School, my alma mater. He's back. He was one of those casualties on the defense last year with the torn ACL. He's a phenomenal defensive end, and they were really high on him last year coming out of fall camp. So I really think Florida takes a big step forward. I have them winning 8 games. I'm going to continuously say that. I'm going to stand on business. I'm going to look like an idiot at the end of the year when they're 4-5, or 4-8. But Billy Napier, great head coach, great offensive guy. I think Florida is going to take a big step this year. Billy Napier is going to have his job at the end of the year too.
Yeah, I have Florida in here as well. I think we went through a phase where Graham Mertz was significantly overrated when he was at Wisconsin. He had that phenomenal start during the 2020 season, threw more interceptions and touchdowns in 2021. So all of a sudden, people still were high on Graham Mertz, but he wasn't very good. And then transfers to Florida, has a really efficient season. I mean, throwing 3 interceptions, throwing for almost 3,000 yards, completed almost 73% of his passes. I don't care what the style of offense is. I don't really care if he's not throwing it deep. The fact is he limited his mistakes, which is huge, and there's trust in him to be able to throw the ball. He threw the ball more than he ever did at Wisconsin. Wisconsin doesn't throw the ball much, but throwing more than that just proves that they had the trust in him to be able to do it. And I really like the additions that they put on offense. I know they lose ETN, but I like their ability to be able to propel them to a bowl game. They're going to need to, play well when it gets close to the end of the season. I don't think they're going to enter 6-1 into October. I think in November, we'd all be stunned if they were 6-1 on November 1st. But they've got a schedule early enough to manage to really set themselves up for November.
And they have the biggest chip on their shoulder this year. I wanted to add that too. These guys are pissed off. No one is saying anything positive about this team. So if these guys have any gumption about them, they're going to come out and beat the piss out of Miami in week 1.
Felipe Frank style winning when that dude was hyping everybody up on the sidelines and then proceeded to suck the rest of the season. Lance, I'll give you the whole SEC. Who you got?
I'm going to throw up in my mouth a little bit, man. I'm going to go far as true, kind of like you guys just did, far as win total wise at a little bit lower. I was going to go Tennessee far as dark horse to compete for the SEC championship at plus 1,800. Those odds to me are just insane in a year where a lot of teams could go 10-2, et cetera. And depending on what the tiebreaker rules are, you never know. But a true dark horse to me is somebody that's got much lower odds than that. Auburn has a win total of 7.5, and I think they get over that win total. It's crept up a little bit because people have been pounding Auburn over. It was around that 6.5 and 7. It's crept up all the way to 7.5. And I just think that, again, I think they start the season 5-0, all 5 home games. And then they play Georgia, obviously at Georgia. They're not going to win that game. But after the Georgia game, they get a bye week before they go to Mizzou. And I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't think that Mizzou, with what they've lost on everything on defense, offense is going to be ridiculous again. But I don't think what they've lost on that defensive side of the ball, that all of a sudden we just give Mizzou the benefit of the doubt that they're just a lot better football team than Auburn this year, especially with Hugh Freeze having a week off to prepare for Mizzou. And then they get Vanderbilt at home, UL Monroe at home, Texas A&M at home, et cetera. That's 9 that I just threw out right there that I think they can win. But I think Auburn can get to 8 wins and get over that win total of 7.5. And I'm going to be retweeting this when you guys put it out. And there's going to be a lot of my Bama friends that are going to watch this, and they're all going to come for me by saying all this. But gotta tell the truth, man. And I unfortunately do think that Auburn's going to be better this year.
Lance Freese right here. You heard it.
Vicky, who is your dark horse or your walk-on team for the year?
All right. Definitely tell me if I need to change this, but
you cannot pick Georgia.
No, I'm not picking Georgia, but what if I pick Ole Miss because I think they're going to play in the SEC championship?
Well, they've never been there, so I think that's fair.
I'll give you that.
Because, all right, and I know I wanted to maybe pick A&M, but I think one of y'all picked A&M last week.
That's fair. I did last week. That's fine.
But I'll say Ole Miss is kind of based on the expectations of that program. It would be a huge deal. It doesn't matter if they do on paper have a roster that can compete. If Ole Miss makes the SEC championship game, they're likely 11-1. And obviously if they make that game, then I would think most of the country would believe in them as a true national championship contender, which is something that program hasn't been pretty much ever, at least since Archie Manning days. And then it would also give more respect to Lane Kiffin, who I think at the end of the day he's revived his career. Like, people respect Lane Kiffin, but they still don't think he's a national championship caliber coach. He can't win the big games. That was the Achilles heel for them last year. Great team, but their 2 biggest games were, they lost. And then got blown out in one of them against Georgia. So I just think that I'm making a prediction. I do think Ole Miss will make the SEC championship game. A lot of that, or I would say a large portion, is definitely because I believe they match up well with the schedule. But with that said, I do believe that they filled in those missing pieces in the transfer portal, and barring some crazy injuries, because that would be a big concern if I was an Ole Miss fan, is if the injury bug hits the Rebels, you could be in trouble. But if it doesn't, They're pretty healthy. They got the roster to win an SEC championship.
Hey, and you owe, I think his name was Jason Sneed or Jevin Sneed, an apology. You said this is the most hype they've had since Archie Manning. Ole Miss was number 4 in the country with old Sneed back there at quarterback. So don't forget about that in the late 2008.
That's true. Yeah,
no, it wasn't it Ole Miss. Mississippi and Mississippi State were number 1 and number 2 in the very first college football playoff poll.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, Bo. What's his name?
Bo Wallace.
Bo Wallace. Don't forget Eli Manning, too.
All right, let's jump into our predictions for the conference. So give me 2 teams that make the conference championship and a winner. Lance, we'll let you go first for who your 2 teams and who wins.
It's going to be very boring here, guys. But I gave this out in our most recent episode. I think it's going to be – we don't know what the tiebreakers are in these conferences yet, which is maddening, by the way, when we're trying to especially in the betting world. But I've got Georgia-Bama in the SEC championship game with Georgia winning it all.
How about you, William?
I'm stuck.
You may come back to you.
Come back to me because
Vanderbilt.
I really
Diego Pavia is going to win it all.
I'm so high on Vanderbilt.
Will's about to go Billy Napier in Florida or something.
That's right. No, I'm not that. What? Oh, no, come back to me. Come back to me.
Go ahead, Thiggy.
Well, I teased one of the teams I think will make it. I do believe in Ole Miss. I think they'll make it. That schedule helps them. And then Georgia. Obviously, I believe in Georgia. I just think that not just because I'm a fan, but I actually think that Georgia, they're going to be extremely motivated based on what happened last year. Like, people joke about how Kirby Smart has to make up stories about they thought you're going to go 7-5. I don't think this team will have to do that because they're going to be hungry. I believe Carson Beck will take that leap. So I do think despite the schedule, Georgia will somehow, with those crazy tiebreakers, whatever it is, will sneak into the SEC championship game and beat Ole Miss for a second time.
Up to you, William.
All right. I was going to mix it up a little bit. I wanted to convince myself Tennessee, but I can't. It's going to be Georgia's the lock. I think all of us are going to pick Georgia probably, unless Jake really goes off the hinges. I got Georgia, Alabama as well. I really want to pick Tennessee to make it there. That's why I had a little hiccup right before we started. Tennessee's schedule is too hard. Alabama has a favorable schedule, I'll say. They're pretty 50-50 on who they get at home and who they have to go away on. Alabama's too good. They're not going to take that big of a step back from Nick Saban. And this roster doesn't look that much different from when he left. I think they're still a phenomenal football team. And I think Kalen DeBoer is an excellent coach. So I think Georgia, Alabama, and I have Georgia winning that game. I'm going to say that out loud, but Georgia's winning the game.
I put it out today that I don't think a single SEC team goes undefeated. I think the schedules are so difficult this year. So I believe that these tiebreakers are going to play a massive factor.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to take Georgia and Texas just because I talked about last week. Texas, their schedule, so they get Georgia at home, they get Florida at home, they get Kentucky at home, they play Oklahoma and Dallas, and they get A&M away. So they really don't have many tough in-conference games. So I could see them losing to Michigan and losing to Georgia and being 10-2, but they only have one loss in conference, meaning that it puts them into the college football or put in the SEC championship game. How it all works out when we have teams with 1 and 2 losses, I have no idea. I'm not still sold on their defense, but Georgia, we talked about it. There's so many guys returning on that team. And even the guys that don't return, they're replacing them with 5-star or they're bringing in a Trevor Etienne. There's so much talent on that team. They're so loaded. I think at minimum they're 11-1. Maybe they are the one team that goes undefeated, but I think with that 4-game schedule, that 4 schedule where they have very difficult games, I think they lose one of them. They need to go 3-1 in their most difficult games, and they face off against Texas. It's a rematch, and I'm thinking Georgia wins the SEC championship this year. Well, Lance, we appreciate you joining us this week. So we'll give you a chance. Go ahead and plug all your social medias. Tell everybody where they can go find you and listen to you guys.
Well, again, fellas, this was a blast. I appreciate you guys wanting me to come on. I'll definitely have to return the favor and have you guys on with me and my boy Tyler. But you can find us at Always Talking Ball on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. And we're on TikTok, we're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. On Instagram and TikTok and Facebook, we're Always Talking Ball. On Twitter, we're at Always Talk Ball on Twitter. So again, just give us a follow, check us out whenever you get a chance. Again, we'll have these fellas on with us sometime as well. But again, really appreciate it, guys. This was a blast.
And I want to add, please give them a follow on Twitter if you use Twitter. Y'all make some of the best clips. I really, truly enjoy watching all of the reels you put on. I call them reels, it's Instagram, but all the clips that you put on Twitter and the questions you put with those. I think y'all do an excellent job with your social media. So kudos to y'all. Please, they're a great follow if you're a college football fan.
Appreciate that, Will.
And Thiggy, thanks for making your debut. We'll definitely have you back on again soon. If you're not doing so already, make sure to follow us on social media. Make sure to follow William. He's trying to get to 1,000 followers before the start of the season. We're getting there. He's verified on Twitter now. Well, he's got the blue check at least.
And I'm 4 away from 900.
You're 4 away. Wow.
We're
going to get there. We're going to get there. We're going to get there.
Well, I'll create some bots, and then they'll all follow you. They're going to have like different Clemson logos and stuff.
I am not beneath having bots follow me. And when they do the purge, I'll go back down to 500 followers. But we'll do it again. We will rise again.
So if you're not following us, make sure you follow us on social media. Check out the walkonredshirts.com. We'll have more content coming out here soon. Next week's actually the first week heading into college football. So we actually have a little bit of preview stuff heading into the very first week. So we'll have that. And then week after is week 1. So make sure to follow us for all that. Make sure to join us for all that content. And we'll be back again next week.